Welcome, colleagues. So glad you're joining us for this explainer on Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. Today, we're going to explore how we can proactively design our online courses to remove barriers for our students without ever sacrificing an ounce of academic rigor. You know, as educators, we all share the exact same fundamental goal, right? We want our students to deeply engage with our content, grapple with those really complex ideas, and ultimately succeed. But let's be honest, sometimes the way our courses are designed can inadvertently get in their way. So today, we're going to unpack exactly how to clear that path.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with the myth of average. Then we'll unpack the 3 UDL principles. Look at how to separate goals from methods, discuss preserving true rigor, dive into some practical UDL strategies in Canvas, and finally, wrap up with a really simple UDL process you can use right away.
All right, part 1, the myth of average.
Picture this. You have 4 completely different students logging into the exact same online course. One student works full-time, so they're tackling most of their coursework late at night when they are completely exhausted. Another is returning to college after, say, a decade away, and they are totally unfamiliar with the learning management system. A third student perfectly understands your course content, but they really rely on video captions to follow along. And a fourth, well, they learn best when abstract ideas are connected to highly practical, real-world situations. If we try to pinpoint the quote-unquote average student among them, we quickly realize it's a totally impossible task. And the crucial takeaway here is that not a single one of these students needs an easier course. They don't. They just need a barrier-free path to engage with challenging, rigorous academic work.
The thing is, traditional course design often rests on this assumption of an imaginary average student. You know the one, someone who always logs in at predictable times, effortlessly navigates complex tech on the first try, and masters content purely from reading lengthy texts. But let's be real, that student rarely exists. Learner variability is entirely normal. It's the baseline. Universal Design for Learning shifts our whole paradigm. It moves us away from asking, man, what is wrong with this struggling student, and instead asks us to identify what unnecessary barrier in our learning environment might be holding them back.
Moving right along to Section 2. The 3 UDL principles.
The UDL framework actually consists of 3 core lenses, and we can use these to proactively build purposeful flexibility into our courses right from the starting line. First, we have engagement, which focuses on the why of learning. Then there's representation, focusing on how students access information. And third, we have action and expression, focusing on how students interact and demonstrate what they actually know. Now, keep in mind, these aren't just rigid checklists, they are helpful lenses to help us spot and eliminate barriers. Let's break them down one by one.
So, engagement. This is all about tapping into the why of learning. It's about giving our students a sense of relevance and ownership. Because, as we know, students differ wildly in what captures their interest, and more importantly, what helps them persist when the academic material gets really tough. Providing multiple means of engagement might look like breaking a massive, intimidating project into manageable stages. Or maybe it's offering really timely feedback, or connecting a highly theoretical concept to an authentic professional situation so they see why it matters.
When we compare a traditional method with a UDL-aligned approach, it's pretty amazing how a tiny shift makes a massive difference. Traditionally, we might just ask students to define a term in a discussion board, right? And we all know that often leads to a bunch of identical, uninspired posts. But a UDL-aligned approach might provide 2 realistic field scenarios and ask students to apply the concept to just one of them. Think about that. The learning goal remains exactly the same. They still have to apply the concept accurately. But offering a structured choice between authentic scenarios, that drastically increases engagement and gives the student a real sense of ownership over their learning.
Next up is representation. This one addresses the reality that absolutely no single format is universally effective for every learner in our courses. This is all about how students access and actually make sense of the information you're providing. We're talking about simple things like combining text explanations with visual examples, using clear headings to organize dense text, or taking a moment to explain unfamiliar disciplinary jargon.
To put that into perspective, think about a really difficult concept video. If it just stands alone with no supporting materials and a student misses a word or struggles to map the ideas mentally, well, they hit a wall. But in a UDL approach, you provide that exact same video, but you add accurate captions, a full written transcript, and maybe a brief diagram outlining the main ideas. Notice that providing these extra supports doesn't dumb down the material at all, no way. It merely removes perceptual barriers, which means students can focus their precious cognitive energy on actually understanding the complex concept, rather than just struggling to consume the media.
Finally, we have action and expression.
This recognizes that students might deeply, truly understand a concept, but completely struggle to communicate it if we only ever allow one rigid format. This principle is all about how students demonstrate what they know to you. It involves providing templates, allowing practice with feedback before a high-stakes final submission, or allowing varied response formats.
Let's see how this plays out in a practical assignment. Say your learning goal is for a student to explain how a specific scientific process works. The traditional approach almost always defaults to mandating a written essay. But hold on, ask yourself, is formal essay writing the actual learning goal here, or is scientific accuracy the goal? A UDL-aligned approach might allow a written explanation, sure, but also an audio recording or a video, and all of them are evaluated against the exact same rubric for scientific accuracy and use of evidence. Unless academic writing is the specific learning outcome, like say in a composition class, giving students flexibility in their output format removes a massive barrier while keeping the destination entirely intact.
All right, on to Section 3, separating goals from methods. As instructors, we really need to clearly distinguish between the goal, the method, and the product. Your learning goal, that essential knowledge or skill, must remain completely stable and rigorous. That is your destination. For instance, evaluate the credibility of a source. Unshakable. But the method, how they access the content, like reading an article versus watching a news segment, that can be flexible. And the product, how they demonstrate their learning, like a written analysis versus an audio explanation, that can be flexible too. Our methods and products can and should be purposefully flexible, as long as they all lead the student to that unshakable goal.
Section 4. Preserving true academic rigor.
I absolutely love this quote from our source material because it really resets our baseline as educators. Rigor comes from the complexity of the thinking students must perform, not from how difficult it is to locate instructions, access materials, or understand what an assignment requires. Confusing course navigation, missing captions, or totally inaccessible PDFs, those are not badges of academic rigor. They are just unnecessary roadblocks. Well-designed flexibility doesn't remove productive academic challenge, it just removes the obstacles that have absolutely nothing to do with the intended learning.
It's also super vital that we differentiate UDL from accommodations. Accommodations are reactive. They are legally required responses to a specific student's documented need, but usually only after they encounter a barrier. UDL, conversely, is proactive design. It anticipates common barriers and builds flexibility in for everyone right from day one. Now, to be crystal clear, UDL does not eliminate the need for official accommodations, but by designing proactively, it dramatically reduces how many students will hit a wall in the first place. It shifts our work from constantly applying reactive patches to proactive, inclusive designing.
Which brings us to Section 5, Practical UDL, right inside Canvas. Take a look at these items. Notice just how actionable they are. Using the exact same organizational pattern in every single Canvas module, providing accurate captions, using descriptive page titles instead of vague ones, using low-stakes quizzes with multiple attempts for retrieval practice. These are simple, high-impact adjustments within Canvas that show how we can thoughtfully use technology to remove barriers. Listen, we aren't automatically creating engagement by throwing a brand new, highly complicated app at our students. In fact, doing that often creates a totally new barrier. Instead, we are using familiar tools purposefully to keep the learning strictly at the center.
And finally, Section 6, a simple UDL process. You don't have to redesign your entire course overnight. Let's just walk through these 5 steps for a single lesson. First, clarify the essential learning goal. What exactly must students know or do? Second, identify the likely barriers. What might prevent a perfectly capable student from showing you they know it? Third, select purposeful flexibility. Maybe an option for representation or a structured choice in how they express themselves. Fourth, check alignment. Does this new option still require the student to meet that rigorous original goal? And finally, evaluate and revise based on how the students actually perform. By walking through these steps, we make sure that every single piece of flexibility we introduce is purposefully tied to getting students safely and effectively to our rigorous academic destination.
Before we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a few retrieval and reflection questions. I highly encourage you to pause the explainer after each of these next 3 questions and try to answer them from memory, applying what we've covered to your own work. Ready? First question. Think of just one activity or assignment in your current course. What is the essential, unshakable learning goal? Is it actually writing a paper, or is it demonstrating an understanding of a historical event? Get incredibly clear on that true destination. Pause and think about it.
Okay, question 2. Keeping that specific goal in mind and thinking about the predictable,
totally normal variability of your students, the ones working late, the ones with different tech backgrounds, the ones who need captions. What unnecessary obstacle in the format, the technology, or the instructions might trip them up? Pause and identify that barrier.
And finally, question 3. What one change could you make to reduce that barrier today without lowering the academic expectation? It could be adding a rubric, providing a transcript, offering a choice of format, you name it. Pause and think about your one change. By making just one purposeful change to clear that path, you are already practicing universal design for learning. You are empowering more of your diverse, capable students to achieve exactly the high standards you set for them. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and happy designing!